Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. U.S. President Donald Trump signs an executive order to pause some of his tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Plus, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith making rounds on American TV news networks to defend new alcohol rules. And police make over 100 arrests and lay over 300 charges in a major national child exploitation operation.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc says Canada has suspended a second wave of retaliatory tariffs after U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to pause some of the tariffs on Canada. The order removes tariffs for about a month on Canadian goods that are compliant with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. Trump announced earlier today he would pause his 25% tariffs on Mexico until April the 2nd. Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs threats have strained financial markets, lowered consumer confidence, and put many businesses in uncertainty. Even with a pause, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says retaliatory tariffs will remain in place until Trump drops the levies completely, adding he expects Canada and the U.S. to be in a trade war for the foreseeable future. He made the remark a day after Trump delayed tariffs for a month for vehicles coming through the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement on trade. Trudeau confirmed today that he won't be lifting any reciprocal levies if Trump leaves any tariffs on Canada.
Focus we have right now is on reducing the impacts of the tariffs. I can confirm that we will continue to be in a trade war that was launched by the United States for the foreseeable future. So Canadians should continue to buy Canadian, continue to stand up for each other. But we are trying to reduce the areas and the impact that these tariffs that the Americans are bringing in will have on Canadian workers. But Canada will continue to stand firm and unequivocal that as long as there are tariffs on us from the United States that are completely unjustified, we will be responding strongly.
A Republican representative says Donald Trump's pick for ambassador to Canada will stand up for his country. Trump chose Michigan Congressman Pete Hoekstra as the top U.S. diplomat in Ottawa, pending Senate confirmation. Michigan Representative Bill Huizenga, that is, says Hoekstra sticks to his principles and works hard. He says Hoekstra will also make it known immediately if he feels people are disrespecting Trump or the United States in Canada. And today on X, Ontario Premier Doug Ford posted, "The only thing that's certain today is more uncertainty. A pause on some tariffs means nothing. Until President Trump removes the threat of tariffs for good, we will be relentless." The Ontario Premier had said he would begin charging 25% more for electricity shipped to 1.5 million Americans on Monday in response to Trump's tariffs. Ford said he doesn't want to do it, but the province will not back down until Trump rescinds all tariffs. Ontario provides electricity to Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith made the rounds on American TV news shows to defend her new alcohol rules. Smith says Canada must look out for itself in this tariff war with the U.S. Smith and other premiers said they would stop buying American alcohol and halt contracting with U.S. companies in response to tariffs. Smith says her province will need to look at selling to other markets in the U.S., if the U.S. rather keeps its tariffs in place. Smith told CNN that American producers want Alberta's raw materials to create jobs and manufacture goods. She says she'd prefer to work with the Americans on increasing the amount of product headed south. The federal government is trying to secure extensions through to 2031 for its national $10 a day childcare program. Prime Minister Trudeau has announced 11 provinces and territories have agreed to extend the deals. The agreements give those jurisdictions billions of dollars to cut childcare fees for families. Alberta and Saskatchewan have not yet agreed to extensions, and Ontario has an agreement in principle with the federal government, but but not yet a signed deal. The Prime Minister and his Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, Jenna Sudds, made the announcement today from a childcare centre in the Ottawa suburb of Canada.
These investments have been historic, and the progress that we have made in just a short amount of time is truly, truly amazing. These parents have shared what it's meant to them, what it's meant to their families, their ability to get ahead, their ability to save for the future, and the ability to invest in themselves and their careers, returning to the workforce should they choose to, being able to pursue their hopes and their dreams in their careers as well. It's making a real difference. We've seen women's participation in the workforce reach all-time highs.
In other news, police say they have made more than 100 arrests and laid more than 300 charges in a major national child exploitation operation with the help of device-sniffing dogs. The announcement was part of an update from RCMP and other police forces on a project aimed at protecting children from sexual abuse.
It's important that we don't miss devices because missed devices means missed evidence, and missed evidence can also mean a missed victim that we would have had a chance to otherwise identify. So once the officers have completed their search, we bring in Harley, and then Harley tries to find any devices missed through scent detection. And our statistics so far in the last 2 years is in about 60% of our search warrants, Harley is finding devices that the investigators have missed.
Well, way to go, Harley. Here in Alberta, Mounties say they have launched an investigation following a complaint regarding Alberta Health Services. They won't provide further details, but the investigation follows allegations from the agency's former CEO that there was high-level arm twisting and possible conflicts of interest and corruption. Anthana Mentzelopoulos is suing the province for wrongful dismissal, saying she was fired in January for looking into the overpays on contracts with private surgical providers. None of the allegations have been proven in court. Earlier this week, Alberta Health Minister Adriana LaGrange defended her role in what's become known as the corrupt care scandal. She says the allegations against her are false.
I look forward to them being defended very vigorously in the statement of defense that will be coming out very shortly. I have always been a servant leader. In all of the things that I've done long before I became an MLA, long before I was a school board trustee, as a mother of 7, as an active person of faith who was involved in my church and in my community and in so many different boards and committees, et cetera, that I've been on. It has been a huge honor for me to serve the people of Central Alberta, Red Deer North in particular. And I value the trust that the Premier has put in me to get the refocusing done.
Former Chief Judge of the Provincial Court of Manitoba, Raymond E. Wyant, was appointed as the lead of the third-party investigation into the procurement processes used by the Government of Alberta and Alberta Health Services. The Alberta government says another $5 million would be added to help fund food security if this year's budget is passed. Since 2020, the provincial government has invested more than $31 million to help food banks and community organizations support Albertans in need. Social Services Minister Jason Nixon says no family should have to choose between buying groceries and paying their bills.
No family should have to choose between buying groceries and paying their bills. But unfortunately, we know there are many Albertans across the province who are struggling to make ends meet and to put food on their tables. The people who need the support of food banks in our province may surprise you. With 1 in 4 households in Alberta experiencing food insecurity, many of these individuals are employed and earning a paycheck. These folks are our neighbours, our families, our children's classmates.
The proposed budget also dedicates $20 million for Alberta's school nutrition program to ensure no kid has to go to school on an empty stomach. As of April 1st, the Alberta Child Care Program will undergo significant changes, including the introduction of a provincially set daily parent fee of $15 a day for full-time early learning and care for children up to kindergarten age. The set fee applies to children who attend licensed child care centres and family daycare home programs during regular school hours. The monthly set fee amounts to just over $326 for full-time care and $230 per month for part-time care. The chair with Childcare Now Alberta, Susan Cake, explains how this new change will work.
All families will be paying $326.25. And so if you were paying over that, you're going to see a drop. If you were paying under that, then you were going to see an increase. And in some cases, that increase is going to be quite substantial. For Lethbridge, I mean, we're still struggling a lot with just filling spaces. Like, we're getting more spaces for all the children that are there. It would just be very beneficial if the government can actually address that and get spaces up to the number of children that we have so families can actually access them before doing this fiddling behind the scenes that they seem to be doing about making certain families pay more and certain families pay less. I don't understand what's going on because the parental subsidy is funded by provincial dollars. So getting rid of it doesn't seem as tied to the federal agreement as they're suggesting it is. And it would be great if local representatives in Lethbridge could offer some clarification on why this is the case here and not elsewhere.
Cake says the Alberta government intends to bring the $15 a day fee down to $10 a day by March 31st of 2026. Lethbridge police have charged a woman with careless driving in connection with a pedestrian collision in which 3 children suffered serious injuries. Police say the 3 children were crossing a marked crosswalk on the intersection of 13th Avenue and 23rd Street in the morning of January 20th. They were then struck by a vehicle heading southbound on 23rd Avenue. The driver, 60-year-old Janice Elizabeth Madsen, stopped and remained at the scene. The children required surgery and a GoFundMe account was set up in their name, with the community contributing more than $100,000 in support for the family. They have since been released from the hospital. Madsen is charged with 3 counts each of careless driving and failing to yield to a pedestrian at a crosswalk. She is scheduled to appear in court on March 25th. The Lethbridge Police Service has been under major transformation since 2020 when Chief Shaheen Medizadeh began as the city's police chief. On Thursday, Medizadeh, who has more than 35 years of national and international police experience, chatted in a series talk about the key challenges he faced when he came to the institution.
Bigger challenge pieces were internally the organization was broken to the point of a lot of distrust, in-house fighting, poor leadership, and that resonated in even the performance of the department. And also there were a lot of very large public issues that I think that had gone public that had to be managed. In addition to that, when I came here within a very short time of being here, because of COVID and some of the challenges, financial challenges, our budget was cut, so we had to try to manage policing and deliver with less. I had to bring more sense of security and respect internally to the organization, working with employees. And in addition to that, externally I had to connect more with the community and also become more transparent with our citizens. Our citizens expect a police service that meets their expectations and needs.
Medizadeh began his policing career with the RCMP in 1989, and his experience includes general patrol duties, major crimes, drug and organized crime, covert operations, and national security. The fate of the Grassy Mountain coal mining project is now at the hands of the Alberta Energy Regulator. After multiple hearings held in the Crow's Nest Pass and Calgary, the AER has 90 days since Tuesday to make a decision on Northback Holdings' proposal. However, as BCN's Landon Hickok tells us, it's a much more complicated talking point than it seems.
The Alberta Energy Regulator has 90 days to make a decision on the Grassy Mountain coal mining project. As Tuesday witnessed the conclusion of a hearing at the AER's office in Calgary on Tuesday, Northback Holdings, the company proposing the project, says they only intend to kickstart exploratory drilling. Toxicologist Mandy Alsgaard says she isn't aware of any other time AER held a hearing for exploratory permits like this.
The hearing was novel. I've not experienced, I've never been a participant in a hearing on exploration and drilling permits. And going back, I actually couldn't find evidence that they've ever had a hearing on just an exploration permit. So that tells you how big of an issue coal development in the Eastern Slopes is in Alberta.
Outside the hearing, there are critics accusing Northback of lack of transparency when it comes to their knowledge and intentions on the project. Chris Spearman, spokesperson for Water for Food, says in his letter to Premier Smith that Northback Holdings have not responded to his questions on the effects of selenium since an information session was held in June of 2024.
Northback has failed to answer questions. They failed to answer them at the hearing, and they failed to answer questions since they've been asked since June the 7th last year when I went to their meeting in Blairmore.
Even Alsgaard showed her disappointment after Northback refused an invite to participate in a panel discussion held at Lethbridge's Southminster United Church on Wednesday night. The panel held discussions between experts within toxicology, agriculture, and Indigenous groups, including Alsgaard and Spearman themselves.
It originally started off with a debate, and there was supposed to be representatives from Northback, so like coal company representatives from the Coal Association of Canada. I was hoping we would get an audience that was representative of, this area and people who are looking for jobs from coal mining, people who are concerned about coal mining and how that could affect their jobs in agriculture. And then I was notified by the organizer that there won't be anyone from industry or the Coal Association of Canada. But it seems to be the people who are really trying to dig in and understand how coal is going to impact all the sectors in the area and the environment. And then we won't have that industry voice there to really talk about specifically about their mining, their operations, the technologies they're going to use.
While residents of southern Alberta appear to hold various sides of the topic, ultimately the Alberta Energy Regulator will decide on the project's fate and Northback's proposal by June. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
The Pope has issued an audio message thanking people for their prayers. Pope Francis sounded out of breath and weak in the audio message issued by the Vatican.
De todo corazón, las oraciones que hace por mi salud desde la plaza. Los acompaño.
This is the first public sign of life from the 88-year-old pontiff since he was hospitalized 3 weeks ago with double pneumonia. But the Vatican says his health is stable enough and it won't issue another update on his condition until this Saturday. Well, here in southern Alberta, we saw lots of sunshine today, and there's more of that coming our way, along with a full look at the forecast. That is next. And now here is a look at your local 7-day and national forecasts.
The projected forecast for Lethbridge's next 7 days are as follows. A high of 6 and a low of -5 are set for today. Tomorrow we'll have a high of 10 and a low of 4 with sunny skies. Saturday will be sunny as well with a high of 12 and a low of 5. Sunday and Monday will both be sunny as well, with Sunday having a high of 14 and a low of 4, and Monday will have a high of 13 and a low of -6. Tuesday's looking to be partly cloudy with a high of 7 and -5 for the low. Wrapping up the 7-day forecast with Wednesday, we are looking at a 30% chance of showers with a high of 2 and an estimated low of -8. Today's almanac lets us know that the average high for today went up from 4 to a high of 5, and the low still sits at -8. The record high for today was set back in 1987 with 18, and the record low was a frigid -36 set back in 1920. The sun rose at 7:04 and set at 6:22, giving us a 4-minute difference from yesterday. Moving on to the national forecast, both Vancouver and Victoria share a high of 11 with partly cloudy skies. Edmonton has a high of 8 with sunny skies, and Calgary has a high of 11 with sunny skies. Saskatoon has a high of 2 with sunny skies. Regina has a high of 1 with a 30% chance of snow, and Winnipeg has a high of -5 with sunny skies. Toronto has a high of 2 with chance of snow, same for Ottawa with a high of 0, and Montreal with a high of 1. On to the East Coast, Fredericton has a high of 0 with a 30% chance of rain or snow. Halifax has a high of 4 with a 30% chance of rain, same for Charlottetown with a high of 9, and St. John's has a high of 7 with a 40% chance of rain.
Canada's merchandise trade surplus rose to its highest level since May of 2022, with both exports and imports surging higher in the face of the U.S. tariff threat. Stats Canada says the country posted a trade surplus of $4 billion for January. Total exports increased 5.5% in January, reaching a record of $74.5 billion. Exports of motor vehicles and parts rose 12.5%, while exports of energy products increased 4.8%, helped by higher oil and natural gas prices. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, which represents 3 big automakers in North America, says it welcomes a 1-month exemption on stiff new tariffs slapped on imports for automakers from Mexico and Canada. However, the group's president hopes it will be a path forward to a permanent solution that recognizes the integration of the North American market. The exemption is for any vehicles coming in through Canada-US-Mexico Agreement on Trade. President Donald Trump spoke with leaders of the big 3 automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, and asked if 3 days was enough for the auto sector to prepare for the new taxes. Well, Canadian Tire is rolling out a new strategy that will see it invest $2 billion over 4 years to restructure the company for growth. But it will also close some stores. The Toronto-based retailer says its new True North plan will move the business away from its holding company model to a more agile organization by combining the systems and data it holds across all of its brands. As a result of the new plan, 17, quote, uncompetitive stores under its Atmosphere banner will close. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 286 basis points today to 24,584. The Dow was down 427 points to 42,579. The S&P 500 was down 104 points to 5,738, and the Nasdaq was down 483 points to 18,069. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 5 cents to 66.36 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 14 cents to 4.30 US. Gold was up 1.30 to 29.1660 US an ounce, and silver was up 20 cents to 33.06 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley is at $6.53, canola is at $14.42, and corn is at $8 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down 27 cents to 196.27. Feeder cattle March contract was down 207 to 274.02, and lean hogs April contract was up 195 to 86.65. And the Canadian dollar was slightly down over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 69.90 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc says Canada has suspended a second wave of retaliatory tariffs after U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to pause some of his tariffs on Canada. The order removes tariffs for about a month on Canadian goods that are compliant with the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. Trump announced earlier today he would pause his 25% tariffs on Mexico until April 2nd. Coming up after the break, we chat once again with Dr. Danny Leroy, professor of economics at the University of Lethbridge, about the impact of U.S. tariffs and how Canada's retaliatory tariffs won't help Canadians but make things more expensive. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can visit our website or YouTube page anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews. Well, here we are. The U.S. tariffs are in place. So how should Canada respond? Is retaliation the most effective thing to do? Both sides insist that they will win, but as in most fights, reality is someone eventually loses. So joining us today to discuss this is Dr. Danny Leroy. He is an associate professor of economics at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome back, Dr. Leroy. Great to have you with us once again.
It's a delight to be back, Jeanette. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you're welcome. Okay, so 25% tariffs. They are now a reality for Canadians and Americans. And our Prime Minister and the Premiers all seem to be saying that they will not back down and will respond tit for tat with retaliatory tariffs. So this is going to, of course, drive up prices in both countries, though, right?
Oh, well, there's a lot to unpack here. At the beginning, you said, you know, when there's a fight, one party eventually loses. Well, in a tariff fight, both parties lose. And it's important to identify this, right? The import taxes, the tariffs that are put in place in the United States that prompted this are taxes on American importers. They're taxes on American citizens buying goods produced by individuals outside of the United States, like suppliers from Canada. And the more money that these people, these importers, have to spend on imported products means that there's less money to spend on everything else. It reduces their capability of buying other goods and services, not only produced by Americans in the United States, but by individuals all over the world. So the harm that's caused on Canadians is secondary. It's a consequence of American importers buying less. The second thing you pointed out here was, are the retaliatory tariffs, are they going to be effective? Are they a good idea? This involves taxing Canadian citizens who want to buy goods produced in the United States. This doesn't resolve the problems created by Trump imposing tariffs. It exacerbates the problem. It makes it worse. So rather than more goods being produced, more goods being traded across geopolitical boundaries, less is produced, less is traded. And because less is produced, that is why prices go up.
Yeah. You know, Danny, last time we had you on, it was a few weeks ago, and you and I had a discussion after the interview about retaliatory tariffs, and you weren't convinced that they were a good idea because it was almost like shooting ourselves in the foot. As you know, it's Canadians who pay the tariff fees for Canadian tariffs on U.S. imports. So, you know, you thought it would be counterintuitive or counterproductive. So now here we are, right? Have you changed your mind on this? It doesn't sound like it.
It's tariffs are self-inflicted financial harm. They reduce the ability of buyers to access products produced more cheaply by people outside of the country. And governments collect the revenue from this, so they stand to benefit. But individuals who wish to import these goods stand only to lose. And that's in the first instance, right? So that they're causing, it's self-inflicted harm. So the worst response would be to a country where tariffs are being raised is in retaliation to raise tariffs, to raise taxes on Canadians. If there's one thing that this tariff war has underscored, that is that how important trade is, how valuable it is in terms of creating prosperity, and how damaging taxation is. It stifles the ability of consumers to buy products from lower cost producers, and it stifles the ability of producers to take advantage of purchasing lower cost inputs.
Yeah, and I mean, the two countries are so intertwined and so interconnected, and you don't realize it until these tariff wars take place, because now, I mean, it's looking like with the Canadian tariffs or whichever way it goes, I know that it's going to affect groceries. So like Americans, we'll have to pay more for, what was it, like eggs, milk, cheese, all kinds of groceries, footwear, clothing. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
The list is not it's not ending, right? It's an infinite list, and that's because, Jeanette, goods that consumers buy are not simply products of the United States. They require resources that are produced all over the world.
Yeah.
These resources ultimately cross geopolitical boundaries, and every time an importer has to pay a tax, it reduces their ability to purchase more of that good, and it raises costs ultimately on final consumers. So it's just not automobiles, it's just not energy, but it is the whole litany of all goods and services that people consume which are affected. And it connects to the first point that I made, and that is that everybody loses in this fight, right? Less is produced and at higher cost, and because less is produced, there's less available for consumption. And I think it was Elon Musk said, if we don't produce stuff, well, then there's no stuff. We have to encourage production in order to satisfy the wants and needs of consumers, regardless of where they are on the planet.
Yeah. So what would the proper response have been, in your opinion, instead of retaliatory tariffs?
In place of retaliatory tariffs, I think there's several courses of action that should be pursued, and some of these are. First is reducing barriers to trade within Canada, making it easier for goods and services to cross provincial boundaries, where people aren't penalized for buying a good or a service produced in a different province. That's very important. There's a lot of gains to be had through improving that trade. The second thing that's important, I think, is, and I think we mentioned this perhaps last time, is reducing any leverage that the president might be trying to exercise. So where there are import taxes in place on Canadians, these should be reduced and ultimately eliminated. This would improve the flow of products from where they are produced at lower opportunity cost, and it would increase the scope of consumptive opportunities for consumers in Canada. And the people who would benefit the most are the least well off, the people that are the most impoverished in Canada. If they have greater access to inexpensive goods, they stand to gain the most. So import taxes are, in an important way, a very regressive taxation tool.
Now, some sources have said that during that phone call with Prime Minister Trudeau and Donald Trump, they had offered to drop tariffs on certain items. So I guess Donald Trump offered to drop tariffs on certain items if Canada were to drop all retaliatory tariffs. And Trudeau refused, saying, oh no, you drop all of yours and we'll drop all of ours. And a lot of people, some people are applauding this and feeling very patriotic. But if he had said yes, would that potentially be helpful, big picture, to negotiate back and forth a little bit there?
Well, when somebody's inflicting harm on themselves, it makes no sense to inflict harm on yourself, right? So increasing taxes on Canadians, I think it's safe to say we're sufficiently taxed in this country. If there's opportunities to reduce the level of taxation, these should be exploited to the fullest potential. So I think that the Prime Minister perhaps could have used this opportunity to not only reduce or withdraw the retaliatory tariffs, but go further, eliminate the ones that existed before this controversy erupted.
Now, if the tariffs were to stay in place for a lengthy period, is it inevitable that the U.S., being about 10 times the size of Canada, would simply wear Canada out?
Well, Canada doesn't wear out, right? It's Canadians. and what happens is that the longer these tariffs are in place, the more counterproductive the effects are, the more destructive the effects are, and over a longer, over a greater number of people. Not only does it make current production more expensive and it reduces the level of output and increases prices, but it stifles entrepreneurial activity, right? So there's lost potential that vanishes, that goods and services that could have come into existence never do, because the resources are being used in unproductive and very costly ways.
Yeah. So if this is going on for a while, what does that mean for our economy? What options do we have?
If it goes on for a while, as it currently is, in the place of prosperity, there'll be increased poverty, right? If the aim is to generate prosperity in a country, you can't tax your way to prosperity. The only way that the prosperity can be generated, the only known way known to mankind, is producing something that you have an advantage at producing, and selling that to people who are willing and able to buy it, and using the proceeds from that sale to buy everything else that you wish to consume. Trade enables a division of labor and specialization that increases the level of output and enables us to escape the clutches of poverty.
Yeah. So for some industries, would the only answer be to find new countries to import and export to if a company has enough capital to weather the storm? Could they potentially thrive again?
But you're not exporting to countries. It's specific people. And where are these individuals located? The United States is home to some of the most capable buyers of products produced in Canada. And part of the reason is we share a similar language, similar culture. We're familiar with the tastes and wants of Americans. It's easier to satisfy than consumers that are located on distant, on faraway places on the planet where we don't share a language, we don't share a culture. It's hard to identify and communicate and grasp what it is that these individuals would like from potential suppliers in Canada. It's much more costly. So just finding a country where we can sell this stuff really doesn't resolve the problem. The problem lies in finding capable individuals whose current needs are not being met, that we can somehow marshal resources here and produce a good or a service that they're willing, able, and do pay for.
Mm-hmm. And Canada, of course, has some minerals that are quite essential for the U.S. economy. One of them is potash, which is needed to produce fertilizer for farms. And obviously, food security is a big thing. And apparently, Canada is the world's largest producer of potash, with the U.S. being our biggest customer. So could something like this be a major point of leverage for Canada?
Well, it makes it more expensive. The import tax on farmers in the United States or manufacturers of chemical fertilizer in the United States who are buying potash produced from suppliers in Saskatchewan, for example, it makes it more expensive. And what happens when the price of fertilizer goes up? Well, farmers have a clear incentive to use less. They look for substitutes. They change the crops that they produce. And so rather than being able to take advantage of a low-cost input, they're compelled to produce at higher expense, and yields will be lower. And they're guided to, as if by an invisible hand, to produce things that they're not as effective at producing.
Yeah. Would that same thought be, for on the military side of things, where Canada has some rare minerals that are crucial for the U.S.'s armed forces? And so is there a way to use this as leverage?
The armed forces don't buy it directly, right? What happens is that there's a manufacturer that buys these primary products from suppliers in Canada, and these manufacturers now have to pay 25% more for this imported product. And because they're paying more for this, they have less available to buy everything else that they need to buy, right? And ultimately, it makes a military procurement more expensive, but it's the outworking of a manufacturer facing higher input costs because of this tax.
Wow. Yeah. And now in the ag sector, I know that you teach a lot about that. How long would it take for farmers to find alternative, countries or people to export grains or animals to? Is it possible for them to thrive without the U.S., I guess is the question.
The answer is for most commodities produced by farmers in Canada, the U.S. is by far and away the country where the most capable buyers are located. It's by at least an order of magnitude. So what, almost irrespective of the grain or the oilseed or the livestock, it's the U.S. There are a few notable exceptions, but it's if the product has been produced and American importers choose to buy less as a consequence of the import tax, this produced product will find its next most capable buyer. And if it's not a buyer in the United States, it might be a buyer in Canada, and the prices may fall a little bit here in Canada as the process unwinds, right? That we're looking for a higher price product, but in the meantime, we either have to sell it or smell it. So it's got to be sold domestically. In the longer term, I agree with you. It's important to search out, and commercial producers are doing this, and marketing firms are doing this, elevators and so on, is finding alternative capable buyers in jurisdictions beyond the United States. But again, I point out that this is a very costly undertaking. Right? There is a reason why buyers in the United States were our most important and largest customer. It's the least costly for Canadians to get that product to, and it's the relatively easiest group of consumers to satisfy. Finding alternative buyers means more expense, more difficulty in identifying and satisfying the wants and needs of people who are geographically distant and share or don't share a common language or a common culture. It's hard to satisfy the wants of somebody if it's difficult to communicate with them and expensive to ship the product to them.
Absolutely. Complicated times we are living in, for sure, but we're out of time here. Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us, Dr. Leroy. Appreciate having you on.
You're very welcome.
Dr. Danny Leroy is an associate professor of economics at the University of Lethbridge.
We've all heard about MAGA, Make America Great Again. But what about Canada? Do we need to make Canada great again? There was a time when Canada had a high esteem around the world, but has that declined over the last decade or two? And if so, why? Today's guest has some strong opinions on this. Joining us from Ontario is retired Lieutenant General Michel Maisonneuve. He spent 35 years in the Canadian Army. He served as the Assistant Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff of Canada and Chief of Staff of NATO's Allied Command Transformation in Norfolk. His new book is In Defense of Canada, Reflections of a Patriot. Michel, it's so great to have you with us.
Thank you, Naveen. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité.
Well, great to have you with us again. Can you give us a brief overview of your book and tell us why you wrote it?
For sure, Naveen. So I was very honored to receive an award in 2020 that was presented eventually in 2022. And that award came with the opportunity to make a speech on any topic I wanted when accepting the award. The award's called the Vimy Award. And so, and it was presented to me at the Museum of Civilization in Ottawa. And I'd been unhappy with the status of our country for many years, particularly since 2015. And I thought, as you said, that our country had been declining in many ways due to lack of leadership, lack of service, and a huge bit of complacency within the Canadian population. So I made that speech, and I got a rousing standing ovation, but the next day I was canceled. And so I was approached to write this book so that I could kind of expand on those things that I was unhappy about in our country. And that's exactly the genesis of the book.
Right, because that award, it garnered a lot of attention. Like, some people were angry about it, but others cheered you loudly. So what was it about your speech that stirred up all these responses?
Well, I think some people, especially academics on the left and people who, some of the, I guess, lily-livered, I call them, people in Canada who just were unwilling to look at our country for really the way it is today. They were unhappy, and and this this century's, if you wish, cancel culture, which I was faced with. But I decided that no, I was not going to be canceled. I was going to actually double down on the things I'd said, and it turned out that I'm getting a lot of comments on the book, and I mean 98% of them are positive. And I just explained that, in many ways, and I had, I can go through exactly what I talk about, but there are lots of ways that I think our country needs to improve and get back to the greatness that it was.
Right, because I remember hearing, and this is like back in the 90s and early 2000s, that non-Canadian travelers were sewing Canadian flags onto their luggage or their bags and their clothing when they were traveling because Canada was such a revered nation around the world and people just loved Canadians. You write about Canada's glorious past, Canada Mattered, where we had this honored place in the world. Do you feel that this has faded?
I feel it really has faded, Naveen, and the reasons are quite clear. I think it's because our leaders have not provided us the leadership that we should have. We have let go of a lot of the positions we had in the world. Our military has been degraded significantly right now. And so what it means is that we don't have a seat at the table when countries are speaking now. What we're seeing now with the Americans, with these tariffs that are coming in, that's all part of it. It's because we haven't stood up ourselves to break our interprovincial barriers, to increase and fund our military to the way it should be. We've been free riders and riding on the coattails of the Americans, but also many other nations. And so that's why we are where we are today. We're not, we have a glorious past. Yes, we made mistakes, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have to understand that, these mistakes are there. And if we try to eliminate our past, we will forget those lessons that we should have learned then as well. So there are a lot of ways that we need to fix this country.
So what is our place in the worldview today? Like, do other nations take us seriously?
I don't think they do. And what I tried to do in the book, Naveen, is I explain, the 45 years, so 35 years in the armed forces and then another 10 as a senior public servant. In those 45 years, I've had experiences that put me in situations where I could see where Canada mattered, where Canada made sense and was an important ally. And I just don't see that today. I mean, I'll give you an example. After 9/11, on the 7th of October, 2001, I was sitting to the right of General Tommy Franks when the war began in Afghanistan. I mean, here I was. To the right was a sign that said Canada. To the left, there's a sign that said the UK. And so we were at the table with them. I just don't think that today we have that kind of that level of, if you wish, of interest and consideration by our allies.
And you mentioned earlier how Canada often piggybacks military support off of the U.S. Can you just talk about how our government has failed to the Canadian Armed Forces and what needs to change?
Yeah, so NATO, the NATO nations, first of all, NATO nations in 2014 decided that, and Canada signed on to this, that they were going to devote 2% of their gross domestic product to national defense. We have never met that. And then in 2014, we were probably at about 1%. We're now at 1.4% probably. Yeah, believe it or not. And so because we don't devote enough money, what happens is we don't have enough equipment. We don't have enough personnel. Right now, we're missing something like 16,000 people in the Canadian Armed Forces. We don't have enough equipment. We don't have enough personnel to field the equipment that we do have today. And we don't have enough ships. We don't have enough airplanes or military personnel for the Army. So it's kind of it's one of those things. So we've been actually been free riders, if you wish, on the coattails of Americans who pay something, I saw some statistics this morning, something like 66% of the entire NATO budget is paid for by the Americans. All the other nations put together is only 44%. So that's not fair. I mean, we need to pay our share. We haven't done so.
And your book includes some opinions on free speech. And tell us why this is so important and what you would like to see put into place to bring an increase to the freedoms that we already enjoy here in Canada.
Well, Naveen, I think you'll agree with me that if you want to speak and you're part of the ongoing narrative, that you believe the same thing as the media brings out and all that, you're going to be fine. You got to be able to give your speech, and you won't be canceled for it. But if you happen to have an opinion that is different than the normal narrative, and you want to express that opinion, not hatefully, but in a nice way that actually provides also facts to back up your opinion, then that's when cancellation occurs. And so, for 45 years, I was restricted in my freedom of speech. I had, I could not criticize government policy because I was inside, if you wish, in a way, government, and I was there to implement policy as opposed to criticize it. But now that I'm out of the military, out of the public service, I have a right, like every citizen, to express my opinion. And so that's what I mean by freedom of speech. We must be able in Canada to talk about anything we want to, as long as it's not hateful, and to give our opinion, backing it up with facts. And that's what I tried to do in this book. And I hope Canadians actually will come out of their complacency, because I think that's another huge problem that we have. Canadians just kind of go along and don't have an opinion. Sometimes they don't care what the government's doing. Sometimes they don't even vote. I mean, the participation in our elections is very low. So we need to get Canadians out of their complacency, and that's why this book is, to me, was important. And also, I wanted to create a dialogue. So the ideas in there you may not agree with, but at least look at them. Think about them, consider them, and if you agree, fine. If you don't, tell me why, and come back to me and give me, other ideas that should be considered, and that might actually change my opinion.
And it's interesting about that censorship, because here at Bridge City News, we experienced that firsthand during the pandemic, when we had medical experts on that would say things that would challenge either local health authorities or the WHO. We would actually get restricted on YouTube and other platforms because we would say something that we would present someone's opinion that would question the narrative. Now, you have earned the nickname of the anti-woke general, and you have a chapter on radical agendas, quote. Now, this is on climate alarmism, DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, wokeism. Where is Canada headed?
Well, I think we have gone too far to the left. I really do. I mean, in all our policies, all the money, all the special interest groups that are being funded by the government right now in those areas that you just talked about, the whole woke idea, the whole DEI, going extreme on the extreme far left on this stuff. So all I'm saying is, let's bring the pendulum back. DEI was kind of it's the ongoing thing of affirmative action. It's kind of the next step from affirmative action. And I think what we need to have inclusive meritocracy, where the only time that you look at two candidates that may be absolutely the same to fulfill a certain position, and if one is a little more diverse than the other, and you want to improve your diversity, okay, fine, take that. But the rest of the time should be just meritocracy, that the best people get in. For example, in recruiting, we've had too many of these employment equity targets, and I'm okay with someone who wants to serve, meets the standards, should be allowed to serve. But I mean, I don't think you should prioritize one group over another group. That's just identity politics that don't help unity of this country. And so to me, that's kind of where I stand on this stuff.
And militaries succeed or fail in large part to their leadership. You suggest the same applies to a nation. So what needs to change in our nation's leaders?
Well, I mean, first of all, our nation's leaders, I think, need to believe in our nation. We need to get better in patriotism. We need to promote Canadians. Naveen, we needed Donald Trump to kind of shake us out of our complacency a little bit and have some Canadians start talking about patriotism, start flying the flag, start, singing our national anthem with some gusto. That doesn't mean you should boo some other nation's anthem. I believe that is not the right way to do things, because an anthem represents the people, not the leaders of the country. So we have nothing against the people of the United States, so we should not be booing their anthem, but we should be screaming our national anthem, singing it with some meaning, and so our leaders need to promote that. Our leaders need to get back to some common sense. Our leaders need to look at what's going wrong in Canada and get a whole of society effort to fix it. And that's going to take some leadership, and I believe that right now we don't have that.
I think Canadians are like they're patriotic, but they're very reserved in their patriotism. But every once in a while, it peaks out. You know, we saw the Four Nations final where Canada beat the U.S. We saw a lot of patriotism there. But you're right. I think it just needs to come out more. And you said this. You said Canadians need to be shaken out of our complacency just earlier there, and that we need more outrage. And yet we also need to be respectful with those who disagree with us. Can you just unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine balance, isn't it? I mean, because you don't want to get into a society that, you know, you start beating up on those that don't agree with you. You need to have a dialogue. You need to have some respectful dialogue, but also one that takes things into consideration. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. I'm going to listen to your point. And if you have a good point and you've actually got facts to back it up, then I will, you know, reluctantly perhaps have to agree with you. And so we need to be more upfront about this. But the kind of outrage I think I'm talking about is that when somebody hears that something is going to, that some decision was made that absolutely makes no sense, not to just sit back and say, well, you know, that's the government and there you go. No, you need to be outraged by it. Write to your MP, talk to your friends, say, you know, discuss it with them, have the dialogue, and then take some action. And so we need to be better at doing this. And it cannot just be one way. You know, and you need to take a position. That's the other thing, is our government very often tries to fix both sides of an issue. You know, you look at what's going on in Israel. We are my wife and I are huge supporters of Israel. That's who we should be supporting. And we should not let, you know, it's okay to do pro-Palestinian, those that want to demonstrate, that's fine, but they should not be doing it in a way that's hateful to our country and to Israel. Anti-Semitism has no place in our country.
Michel Maisonneuve is a retired Canadian Lieutenant General and author of In Defense of Canada, Reflections of a Patriot. Michel, merci beaucoup. Thank you for joining us today.
Merci, Naveen. Great to speak to you. Thank you. Merci.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.